Hello, I'm Dr. Sheila Mitchell, and I welcome you to the benefits and considerations for developing in-house training. What is the purpose of training? Is it to provide information? Providing information is a respectable goal. However, simply providing information doesn't mean the audience will retain that information. Is the purpose of training to teach? While teaching is honorable, it still doesn't go quite far enough. Simply teaching employees doesn't necessarily provide any return on investment. What you have taught may not help your organization in any way. Developing and delivering training that adds no value is an expensive waste of time, money, and effort. Additionally, your workforce won't be happy that they are sitting through something irrelevant. What you probably want from training is to change employees' behavior in some way. It could be to consider new regulations, could be how to use new equipment, or how to sell new products. The goal is to somehow use new knowledge or skills to improve the company's circumstances. Those circumstances may not be directly financial. They could mean fewer accidents, less lead time for product development, or quicker repairs. The common denominator is that all these changes will provide some sort of gain for the company. Now let's take a look at some of the advantages of developing your own in-house training. First, it's your product, and your organization knows how it's different from competing products, what its advantages are, and how to maximize those advantages. Next, this is your subject matter expert, someone who knows your product and is usually experienced with the applications covered in the training. Your expert also has institutional knowledge, that is, your company's tools, systems, and operations. This type of insight cannot be obtained with outside off-the-shelf training. And finally, these are your learners. Solid training and professional development can retain and grow employees, creating an employee pipeline and avoiding the need for a long talent search. Because they are your employees, you can give them case scenarios that are authentic, that is, what they can expect to see on the job. The more realistic the training is, the more it serves your organization. Finally, your employees can learn by using your own products and tools while performing in the same or similar environments. All this aids in learning gains and applying the new skills. There are downfalls to using generic training. First, you may waste valuable classroom time. Also, learning irrelevant material can bias your learners, which often leads to distrust, where they don't know if any given training is necessary or not. And you want your employees open-minded and receptive to training. Creating your own training gives you the agility to create multiple versions for diverse audiences. While this does involve labor, there are efficiencies to be gained through modularity, so you don't reinvent the wheel each time. You'll be better able to make changes to your training prior to launch, allowing you to adapt to your product or to regulatory changes. It will still affect the cost and schedule of training development, but your training will be up to date at launch. You'll be able to make changes after launch, too. These changes may be based on learner feedback, or you may be keeping the product evergreen. You'll own the intellectual property rights to the training. It's yours to reuse or revise at will, to sell, or to deliver to customers, all with no copyright issues. You are free to use the training to develop job aids, quick references that employees can access as needed and in real time. Finally, you can make refreshers from the original training. It's common practice to use an expert as the trainer, with the idea being that the expert knows what needs to be taught. There are at least two problems with this. One is automaticity. The other is material overload. Let's go into these in more detail. The first problem is automaticity. In general, expertise requires dealing with a lot of information, so experts have adapted. They have performed some tasks so many times that they have automated those tasks. This is referred to as automaticity, and it's where a well-practiced mental operation is now handled in long-term memory, which means the expert performs it automatically and without being conscious of the mental work they are doing. Automaticity is actually a key of being an expert, but because experts aren't aware of their mental work, they can't teach it. To illustrate, you've probably heard the expression that goes something like, he's forgotten more about cars than you'll ever know. Truth be told, he's an expert. He hasn't forgotten all that information, he's automated it. Let's get back to your expert. Because experts automate so many of their tasks, they no longer know how they do what they do. If you ask them how they perform some task, they may try to describe it, but they'll omit up to 70% of their decision points. Many of these are the most practiced tasks, which mean they were probably the earliest skills developed. The end result is that the expert omits the foundational skills your employees need. And because your learners don't get this information, they're forced to figure it out on their own, which defeats the purpose of training. All this tells us one thing: your top expert is probably not the best person to teach the class or to be the sole developer of training content. A good practice is to pair the expert with someone who has early to mid-level knowledge. Each can fill in the gaps the other leaves. Another thing experts are prone to do is to provide too much material. They include too much for the intended audience's knowledge level and needs. They may dwell on advanced theory or focus on advanced problems. Periodically, they'll include too much background and history, which is superfluous to the task at hand. They may add slightly related factoids for interest. But the point the expert misses is this: you don't have to know how a television works to change the channels. It takes a delicate touch, but you have to pare down the presentation to meet the learning objectives and no more. If adding extra information had a positive or even neutral effect, then it would be acceptable practice. However, this information will have a negative impact on learning. The learners tend to remember these factoids, called seductive details, rather than the important content. A far superior use of time is offering a brief summary of prerequisite material. Another good practice is to develop a Train the Trainer program. This program should address how to train people, how to be a competent instructor, and how to engage your employees rather than just lecturing at them. Your Train the Trainer program will be particularly important if you have multiple trainers teaching the same class. It should help maintain the fidelity of the training and promote consistent learning gains across the audiences. Additionally, if instructors develop their own material, the program should include lessons on creating presentations, what to include, and some basic lessons in consistency. For effective training, you need qualified instructional designers to assist in content development because training requires more effort than simply putting bullet points on a slide. And instructional designers are more than graphic designers who pretty up the subject matter expert's slides. Instructional designers present the material with learning in mind. Because the point of training is for the learners to retain and use the information, don't conflate presenting with training. To develop effective training, you must consider your audience. First, you should understand their prior knowledge of the subject. Classes with large differences in prior knowledge are difficult for both development and delivery. It's sometimes easier to consider making multiple versions of the training, each targeted to a different skill level. You should also take into account the end use of the training. The content should meet the needs of the audience. For example, sales personnel and technicians have different knowledge and skill needs. To meet the needs of both groups in a single class will mean everyone has to sit through content that is irrelevant for them, which is a waste of time. Again, consider making multiple versions tailored to the different audiences. We have covered some of the advantages and caveats of developing your in-house training. It affords a level of customization that may make it more effective than off-the-shelf training. However, there are problems with some of the common approaches to training development, such as using experts as trainers. Then there's the need for making sure anyone who does train is competent to do so. Finally, you may have different audiences based on prior knowledge or skill needs, so it may be better to create multiple versions of training targeted to different groups. Thank you for stopping by in a virtual sense. Because training is more than just giving a presentation, Flowserve has an educational services group to develop technical training for both customers and for employees. External customers, you can reach out to your sales representative with your training needs. Employees, feel free to contact me. Again, I'm Dr. Sheila Mitchell. Thank you.